thing we want to get out of reading John Berger's book Ways of Seeing, or at least chapter 3 of it, is a very simple point, I think a very clear point, but a very powerful one. But to get into that point, I want to start by talking about something else first. I want you just to think about some familiar experiences. For the first thing I'd like you to think about is the experience of sleeping together with someone. And I mean by that sleeping. So we use that expression to sleep together as a kind of euphemism or something for talking about sex. But I don't mean that. I mean, lying down in bed and going to sleep with another person beside you. I'd like you to think about that, and I'd like you to think about what it's like to do that. Now, I don't know if you whether you have experiences of that, but it's a thing people do. I have a 3-year-old son, and it's quite common when sometimes he sleeps by himself, but it's quite common. Maybe if he wakes up in the night, they'll call, "Oh, Daddy, he wants me to come and sleep with him for a while." And it's very nice to sleep with him. It's very nice for me. I like to sleep with him. It's very nice for him. Even though when you're asleep, you're basically doing it by yourself. You're not talking to the person or anything like that. Nonetheless, when you sleep with someone else, you really do have the experience that you have a companion. They're there when you go to sleep. As you wake up in the night, you find them, and so on. You cuddle up closer to them, or whatever. It's a thing that people like to do. Not people like to sleep alone too, of course, but people like to sleep together. And I'd just like you to think about that, about what it's like and why it's nice. I guess the thing to notice is that sleeping is basically just a natural process. It's something that any organism is going to do. You do it like you eat, and like you have bowel movements and urination. Like it's just part of the organic process. But it's also it also is pleasant. When you're tired, you look forward to sleeping, and you have to get up too early. You think, geez, I wish I could stay in bed. Again, even though you're asleep, it brings with it a kind of experience. It's not just something that happens to you. Like you do have some experience of your sleeping, and it's a pleasing thing. And one of the things then that's nice is just that you share that experience with someone. It can be difficult sometimes when you don't have someone to sleep with. It's hard to go to bed because it can be quite lonely to go and have to do this thing on your own. It can really make you feel alone. So anyway, I'd like you just to think about that. I'm not going to draw out anything more about that. I really just wanted to put that in your mind and get you to start thinking what's it like to do that with someone? Why might someone want to do that with someone else? Parents and children do it. Sometimes siblings do it. Couples do it. So think about that. Second one, think about eating together, enjoying a meal with someone. Lots of people that I know, me too, when they have to eat by themselves, like they just grab some garbage from the refrigerator, make a sandwich, maybe even just eat some potato chips or whatever, and don't make much of a deal out of it. Lots of people I know, similarly, when they're by themselves, even if they wanted a certain nice meal at a restaurant, would be reluctant to go to the restaurant by themselves. But as soon as there's someone else, people, not always, but often, really like to sit down with that person and have a meal. And people are eager to go to a restaurant with someone else. So there again, eating, like the point about sleeping, like it's a kind of material need, an organic need. It tastes nice. There's a lot of pleasure associated with it. Taste and other things, makes you feel not hungry anymore. Maybe you like chewing, lots of things. Maybe you like the look of the food you're eating. It can be pleasing in lots of ways. It can be pleasing because you take a little break from the day, But there's something about that is very satisfying to do it with someone else. And you basically, when you do it with someone else, you kind of enjoy with them this natural process, a natural process that is pleasing on its own terms, but that feels kind of it just feels kind of empty, done alone. But when you do it with someone else, you share the pleasure of that. It allows you to enjoy the pleasure of that and to enjoy it with and sort of through the other person. And then it also becomes more than that, right? It's not just that person is, so to speak, helping you eat, right? It's not just about the eating. The eating also really becomes a context for you to be with that other person. You talk, you have a nice time with them. The person you want to share your meal with is someone you like, presumably. And so it's sort of the eating becomes a kind of medium for you to have the experience of being together with someone you care about. And so it's a very interesting thing that in that sharing of a meal, you both are together with someone. You're having the experience of sort of connecting with someone, and that being with the other person is something that allows you to really participate in and enjoy that kind of natural activity that is sort of that is otherwise pleasing and satisfying. Let me just pick one more. Like again, going for a walk together. Going for a walk alone can be nice too, and people do that a lot. But again, there can be something really nice about going for a walk together. And it's again a kind of natural thing. Like you're experiencing the pleasures that come from movement and from the seeing. You get to see the whatever it is, the city streets or the flowers in the fields or wherever you're walking. You get to feel the air, hear the sounds. Going for a walk is a very kind of sensory experience and a motor experience, movement. So like eating, which has to do with hunger and taste and stuff, or sleeping, that is a kind of an organic thing. The going for a walk is enjoying these very kind of elementary pleasures of being an embodied being, but pleasures that particularly are brought to life by doing it with someone else, and also pleasurable activities that provide a context for an enjoyable experience of being with another person. So I wanted to start just by getting you to think about those things: sleeping, eating, and going for a walk as activities that it's nice to do with someone else, and think about why and so on. Let's just go, I'll just pick up one little example about eating with someone else. Go back to that situation of you eating with someone else and having an enjoyable experience with that other person. And imagine that it's in a restaurant, where it certainly could be the case. Think about the difference between your experience of and relationship with the person you're dining with, and your experience of the waiter who comes and serves you. Right, where you say, yeah, take my order, bring me this, can you get me another glass of water, and so on. That's a person with whom you're not dining, right? That's a person who is serving you, right? That's a person who is instrumental to you. Like with the interaction you're having with the other person, that other person that's part of the goal, to connect with that person. Right, but the person who's serving you, that's part of the means. That's someone who's an instrument helping you towards your goal, but not integral to the goal. So you can see in that dining experience that there are different kinds of ways people can be involved, kinds of ways you can be involved with another person, that have to do with basically whether the person is an end or a means, right? Whether the person in his or their own right is something of inherent worth to you that you want to connect with, or whether the person is an instrumental support, something that you're basically using to carry out this thing that has its purpose elsewhere. So if you start by thinking about those things, that's the context. We're going to come back to that. I want to now move on to talking about just very quickly a few of Berger's basic points, and then get around to what he has to say about sexuality. When he talks, there's a particular sentence in here that basically I want to explain. And when we get to that sentence, I'm going to come back and refer to these things I've been saying. He's talking about the meaning of man and woman in our contemporary culture. So of course, man and woman can be biological terms, right? The organic body of the member of the human species who produces sperm, or the organic body of the member of the human species that produces eggs. In other words, you can think about man and woman from the point of view of the biological function of reproduction, and that, that's a way that you would define what those things mean. That's the biological meaning. But that's not typically. But that's no doubt part of what we commonly mean when we think about men and women, but it doesn't exhaust it. And part of the point what he's trying to get at here is what is the deeper cultural meaning of those things? When we think of someone as a woman, or when we think of someone as a man, what's contained in that word. And well, basically his point is that in our culture, it's pretty clear that we have quite strong presumptions and expectations about what those things are, so that we take those people who are the biological sperm person or the biological egg person, and because they happen to be those biological beings, we put upon them roles. We put upon them presumed identities that we expect them to answer to, and so he's trying to identify in a way what those things are, and those then have to do more with the words we would commonly, the words masculinity and femininity. Those are the words we'd more commonly use. Not so much about what it is to be a man as a biological meaning, but what it is to be masculine as a character type, or as in terms of have a masculine behavioral style, or what it is to be feminine. Someone might very well say that woman isn't very feminine, right? And what that tells you is that femininity then isn't just the characteristic of being a woman, because if it were, then all women would be 100% feminism just by virtue of being women. But someone can say that woman is not very feminine. They can say that woman is masculine. They can say that man is masculine. They can say that man is effeminate. In other words, we have a sense of what men are supposed to be like, and what women are supposed to be like, so if you're part of this biological group or this biological group, these are the expectations that you answer to as you grow up in this society and try to get by in it. These are the expectations that you're going to answer to whether you want to or not, because regardless of what any other particular individual person happens to think, this is what our culture thinks. This is the prevailing view, sort of worldview that's put upon us by our broader cultural environment. He initially, where do we see that? Well, in chapter 7, he talks about advertising. Right? So you look at ads for Dos Equis beer, or you look at ads for what are some of the other ones? Dolce and Gabbana. You look at ads for popular products like beer, clothing, stuff like that. Go to H&M store and look at the ads. There you see images of men and women, and they're in a way showing you a few things. They're showing you what you're supposed to look like, or at least they're showing you what you're supposed to admire, and here's an ideal look for a woman. Here's an ideal look for a man. I was thinking of the H&M things where you're just going to see an image of what someone looks like. But if you go to a television commercial for beer, you're going to see men and women behave. So you're not just going to see what they dress like, what their bodies look like, what their haircuts look like, but you're also going to see how they interact and so on. And you can go beyond that just to watching, TV shows and movies. Script after script will be about the stories of men and women interacting, and the actors and the directors will have had those men and women behave in certain ways. And there's, again, a tremendous consistency across our culture for how people are expected to behave and play out their man and woman roles, their masculine and feminine roles. So what are those roles? Well, he starts by this essay with saying, well, where I'm saying role, he uses the word presence. He says, what is it for a man to have presence? What is it for a woman to have presence? And what that by presence he means, for you to be able to cut it in the eyes of other people, for you to have that the ability to be recognized, something like that. And he says that if you look at these things in our culture and try to say what it is that they're really putting forward, they say that a man has presence basically by being powerful, by his ability to act. A woman, on the contrary, has presence by her ability to appear, her ability to look good. I mean, that's there's more subtlety to it, but that's basically the thing. Men are powerful actors. Women look good. That's what you're supposed to be. And you will be deemed culturally successful as a man if you live up to that image. You will be deemed culturally successful as a woman if you live up to that. What does it mean to be deemed culturally successful? I mean, it means broadly you will be recognized in that way, but it also means at the level of the particular people you interact with, most of whom are going to share a lot of these views, as probably you and I do, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly. It means this is what people are going to be looking for. This is how you're going to be accepted in social interactions and all the rest. So let's carry on with that a bit. So this presence, then, he says, is for men it's basically about acting, and women it's basically about appearing. More exactly, he says, women in our society are fundamentally expected to be, and sort of defined as being, objects for men. You are successful at being a woman if you are attractive to men. And I'm not going to dwell on the things he says about men. They're certainly relevant too, but the issue actually here has sort of pivots around the image of women. So I'm just going to deal with that for a minute. So he says the way we have come to interpret sort of the worth of a woman, her success at being a woman, and therefore the reality that women who grow up in our culture are always going to answer to, whether they want to, whether their mom or dad wants them to, whether their romantic partner wants them to. Society is going to demand they live up to this. Like, you can't grow up without being subjected to these rules and expectations, right? And so to grow up as a woman is to grow up with the idea that you are supposed to be an attractive object. You might rebel against it, that's fine, but that's the meaning you're always going to be operating, or the sort of grid of meaning that you're always going to be operating in relationship to. And so he says, women are interpreted that way by men, but then equally, women to succeed in that world, they also have to interpret themselves that way. And so he says, a distinctive thing happens to women then, that the consciousness of a woman, the experience of a woman is one that is in an important way built upon growing up in such a way that you always have an eye on yourself, basically asking yourself, am I appearing well enough? So in other words, to be a woman, so let me just repeat, but just bring out one point. So, the basic relationship is, the man looks at the woman and she's defined by that man's gaze. What that means is the woman has to internalize that man's gaze and use it to look at herself. So the woman, in a way, has to live out the role of the man's eyes looking on herself. But so he's talking about that situation of what it is to be a man or a woman, to be defined by those roles in our society. And the important point then is that women are largely defined as objects for men's desire, and that means that as women grow up, they have to themselves interpret themselves that way, which means they have to adopt that sort of male perspective on themselves to they have to have sort of that voice within themselves as the sort of evaluative judger of their own behavior and their own appearance. Those opening pages, anyway, he talks about presence. They're short, but they're quite powerful. So you read them, you'll get much more depth than I'm saying here. But that's the core thing he's moving through. So then the second point he wants to make is he wants to use the history of European painting really to make this point. And he does it quite beautifully in the film and in the book. Basically, he says, the art, painting at least, came to be focused pretty significantly on portraying naked women. Sorry, I use this word correctly. Portraying nude women. The nude became a powerful and central image or type of painting, and so he looks at that to to study this phenomenon of the objectification, the making into an object of women. Pause for an aside. It's not just the history of European painting. Like, one of the things he also does is show, by sort of putting pictures up side by side, how much contemporary advertising. I mean, he's drawing images from the 70s and the 60s, but you find at least the same things now. They're probably even more extreme now. He shows how much contemporary advertising uses those exact same images, those exact same portrayals, those exact same postures that you find in European painting to present women in advertising for the purpose of selling things. And if I have time, I might say a little bit about what it is that they're selling. But let me just carry on with the main point I'm after. One of the things, just to get sort of an aside, but an important point, he says, one of the things that happens in that painting is, it's all women are condemned for their vanity, for being so wrapped up in their appearance. And he says this is a cultural value too. And he says it's a funny, not in the very nice sense of funny, sort of contradictory cultural value, because women are forced to do that by the expectations put upon them by men. And so women, in caring about their appearance, are only doing the thing they're told to do and the thing they have to do to succeed, and yet they are accused of being the ones who make their appearance an issue. So he talks about this also as a pretty oppressive structure in which women are both objectified and put in a kind of subordinate position, and also blamed for their own subordination. So that's kind of the structure. So, as you go through what he's saying, you'll see those points, and it's pretty powerful. So what is this nude in painting? Well, he says the nude is a kind of stylized posture of display of the woman's body for the judging male gaze. In everyday life, we use the words nude and naked as if they mean the same thing, but he says they really don't. The nude is a conventional way of putting yourself on display, whereas nakedness is rather stripping yourself of all protection to be open. So he says this, in a way, the nude and the naked couldn't be more different, because the nude, he says, is just another kind of conventionalized dress. The nude is a way of posturing. It's not really showing yourself. It's putting on a kind of an appearance. And so the nude, in a way, is the opposite to being naked, because it's clothing yourself. It's covering over, in a way, what you really are, with an attempt to wrap around yourself an appealing presentation. But so on page 53, then he says it's quite clear that the nude also relates to lived sexuality, and that's the point now that I want to get to, and I'll just go through that, and that's all I'm going to talk about. So he brings the nude out of the history of painting, but his point is this isn't just an arbitrary thing that happened to be the case in painting. This reflects, first of all, something fundamental about our culture, which is what I was already talking about with men and women, but it also affects how we deal with our sexual life. Basically, I guess the question, we could put it this way, the question to you if you're a man is, do you want your partner to be nude or naked? Are you trying to be with someone, or are you after an image? And the question to you if you're a woman is, are you really, as it were, getting naked? Are you really bringing yourself into the relationship, or are you just trying to appear a certain way? That's roughly the issues, and I'm saying that just to get you thinking about what we're after. So basically, he says, our culture has come to model sexual life on that structure of the desiring gaze of the man focused on the woman as an attractive object. I said this is what's in advertising. Well, advertising is basically, it's telling you this is what you should desire, or maybe even more, I should say, it's telling you this is what you desire. It doesn't ask you what you desire. It says, you want this, you want this, you want this. It does it for the purpose of selling whatever, crackers or whatever the ad is for. But its means for doing that is by interpreting for you your desires. The thing he's trying to do and the thing I'm trying to do is to get you to take a step back from that and not assume that those things have correctly defined your desires, but to see that they're operating with the sort of something that is in you, desire that is in you, but they're not getting that in its pure form. They're grabbing that and saying, okay, this is what it is. This is what you want, and then doing something with it. So what is it that where when our sexual desire is channeled into a way of interpreting itself, and therefore a way of interpreting how we're relating to each other, that is built around this notion of the nude, built around this notion of the male gaze that objectifies the woman. That's a role in which the man is active and the woman is passive, right? The man acts and the woman appears. It's a role in which you are not having a relationship between two subjects in sex. You're having a relationship between a subject and an object. And the woman is really there to, in a sense, serve the man's desire. I want to go back, having said that, I want to go back and think about those first examples now about sleeping together, enjoying a meal together, or taking a walk together. I want you to think about the difference between, in those examples, the point I already made, the difference between doing something with another subject or not. Well, I guess the difference is the difference between doing something with a subject and doing something with an object. In Sexuality modeled on a H&M ad, or whatever it is, Dolce & Gabbana ad, sex is in sex, the woman is playing the role more or less like the waiter is playing at that dinner date that we were talking about. There's someone there who's serving, someone who's an instrument or a means to allowing the man to fulfill some kind of desire. But it's very different than, and she has to wear an outfit, the outfit of the nude, just like the waiter has to wear the waiter's outfit. It's very different from the relationship between two subjects that would be like the one of the people having the meal together. He says, what is the appeal of nakedness as opposed to nudity? Nudity is the advertising image. Sometimes people want to carry out their sexual life because they want to get the things that they see in ads. And he says that's what the ads are trying to make you do. But he says that he's saying that's a kind of crippled version of sexuality, and for a number of reasons. One of them, or the core of it, is because it involves these kind of roles of subject versus object that I was just talking about. But he says sex can be something quite different. Instead of relating to a nude, or if you're in the role of the woman, instead of assuming the role of the nude, you can be naked. And so he asks about why would nakedness be sexually meaningful? And he says on page 59, well, actually in page 58 at the very beginning, he asked that question: what is the sexual function of nakedness in reality? Why is nakedness sexually meaningful? Now 59, he says, of the people in sexual relationship, he says their nakedness acts as a confirmation and provokes a strong sense of relief. If you were dealing with another person, that's kind of complex. It's fine, but it's very complex. But when you get involved in sexual life, he says, the focus of your perception of the other person shifts from eyes, mouth, shoulders, and hands, all of which are capable of subtleties of expression, etc., etc. It shifts from these to the sexual part, whose formation suggests an utterly compelling but single process. The other is, you can choose your words, reduced or elevated, doesn't matter. But the other is brought to their primary sexual category. I'm going to say something more in a minute, but I want to just try to get that out and think about the thing he's saying there about what happens in sex along the lines of what I was saying about sleeping, eating, and walking and sensing. He's saying that there is a basic kind of activity that people are going to engage in that is a pleasurable one, which is the pleasure of kind of sexual coupling. If you want to know why is that satisfying, well, in a way, it's satisfying for the same kind of reason. It's not the same satisfaction, but it's the same kind of satisfaction that eating or sleeping or walking is, in the sense that it's kind of a primary, a kind of elemental dimension of our existence as bodies. So in that sense, he says there's a kind of banality to it, just like there's a kind of banality about food. Like, you just got to eat a few times a day, and you got to eat this stuff, and you're just chewing it up in your mouth and so on. Like, in a way, it doesn't seem like the most elevated human activity, and yet sharing a meal with someone can be one of the richest and most rewarding things you could do, right? but you're dealing with something that's so banal, so basic, so primitive, right? So he says, we need the banality because it grounds us in reality, but it does more than that. This reality, which is the reality of our existence as bodies and so on, this reality, by promising the familiar proverbial mechanism of sex, by offering us this activity that we're going to engage in, and the same activity you engaged in last time, and the same one you're going to engage in next time, he says it offers at the same time the possibility of the shared subjectivity of sex. And so I think the thing he's saying there is you and another person can decide to connect with your bodily being and all the rhythms and desires that come out of that. You can decide to do that together. And that offers its own pleasures, just as eating offers the pleasures of taste and so on. But the pleasure of eating together isn't primarily about tastes. It's primarily about the fact that by doing that with someone, you get to share with that other person. You get to be with them, and you share your subjectivity, and a rich world develops out of that, right? He's saying the same thing about sex. That's what sex could be, and maybe should be, is people, individuals, connecting as subjects around a mutually enjoyable kind of elementary activity to which they're drawn by the fact that they're bodies. There, you can imagine, so first of all, for that to happen, it requires that those people get naked, in the literal sense that you have to take your clothes off, but also in the sense that you have to sort of admit that you're that kind of being. You have to give yourself over to being the kind of person who wants to engage in that primary elemental activity, right? So that also means it's not about putting on a show. It's not about playing other games. It's about doing this thing with this person, which is a very intimate and naked thing. But if you bring that naked attitude, and if that's actually what you want from the other person, the reality that's brought into being is a sharing of subjectivity. It's a matter of connecting. It's a matter of being together, and through that activity, building a kind of shared world with another person. That's very different than choosing another person who you think can serve as an instrument serving your ends, right? So I was making that point before about dinner, the difference between whether the other person is an end or a means, and that's sort of the same point he's making here. Yeah, you can have cultural advertising define for you what you want. You think, oh yeah, I'm supposed to want those things, and then you feel successful when you get those things. And so advertising says you'll be a success if you have a boyfriend that looks like this or a girlfriend that looks like this, and you think, okay, I want to be successful in the eyes of society. You may not say these things explicitly, but this is the psychology that's governing you. Yeah, well, then you find a person that looks like that, and that person becomes an instrument. That person becomes a tool that allows you to feel like you're getting that thing you're supposed to get. If you ask who you're having sex with there, if anything, you're having sex with the cultural expectation, so to speak, right? That's the gaze upon you that you're answering to. And you're trying to succeed in its eyes. You're trying to satisfy its standards. And this person you're involved with is what's allowing you to do that. That person, it could be, it plays out differently just in sort of the stereotypical image of the man and woman who are described in those ads. For the woman, you may want the man who represents the powerful gaze, who thereby confirms for you that you've done a good job of looking attractive. From the man, you may want a woman who's attractive enough that confirms to you that you have the power to get those attractive things. Of course, the terms of your desire may not be heterosexual. That's all fine. I mean, we're talking just in terms of the cultural storyline that we're operating with and how that affects the attitude we bring to our sexual behavior. That story I've just told is very different from going on a walk together, right? That story I've just told is very different from the sharing with another person of a kind of primal or sort of elementary bodily activity and the opening up of a shared world that comes from that.